You have to wait till Thundering Herd sits down. We're moving along quickly this morning because our speaker's going to take a while because he's got a big, important, long story. So we're in for a learning process today. So anyway, we're going to light the chalice now. The words I'm going to say are here in your program. So take a look down at your program. I'm going to get ready to read these all together. Ready? Okay. We'd like to speak of hope, some of the process of truth and meaning, in celebration of what I want to share today.
Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all that there is and all that is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love. Love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames, we rise. Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlie Tyler. I'm the pastoral minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Low Country. It pleases me to look out onto the congregation and see so many new faces. I'd like for you to know that somehow the universe has conspired to bring you into one of the most caring and compassionate congregations that exists. You will find that here, and I do not take that lightly. That's the truth. If you would like to stay for our talk back, you'll be able to see a little bit more about what I'm talking about, the way that we respect each other, guard each other, and take care of each other here in this community. And so hold on to that, and I thank you for being here today. I think you will find this meaningful. There's a number of announcements that are in your bulletin. If you would please take the opportunity to read through them. But we have to conserve our time today to make sure that we give Danny Goldsmith all the appropriate time for the message that he'll be sharing. I'll introduce him to you as we get later on in the service. So if you would please now take your hymnals into your hands. Turn with me to hymn number 123, and may we stand and sing together, Spirit of Life.
So if you brought anything for the Sandalwood Pantry, you can take it to the rear of the congregation, and there's a table there receiving goods. And the other thing you can do is remember the Sandalwood Food Pantry and bring something next week. So anyway, that's going on. And now the next thing here is your opportunity to help support this church. Now, if you're new here or the first time, you don't have to put anything in the basket. Your presence is our gift. So we're going to take our offering right now.
I told Diana I'd come up and send you all her love. She's with her brother now. He came in from Knoxville, Tennessee, another fall, and he's going to be taking her back home with him to stay with her, his wife and him until she gets better. And she wanted everybody to know she's doing well.
Thank you for your generosity.
So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Danny Goldsmith. And his message, How to Be Humane, My Story, How I Survived the Holocaust as a Child. We are thankful to have him here, and we'll be eager to hear what he has to say. I also want you to know that Leah Dukes is assisting him. Leah, I understand you to be a student of the Holocaust, and I'm glad that you are also assisting Danny as well, too. Well, right now, I want to introduce you to Danny, and we'll turn our attention to the message that he has for us today. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Today I'm going to tell you the story of my family, my father, my mother, my sister, and myself during the Holocaust. It's a very short version that covers the period of 1939 through 1945. So first let me give you some background. This is a map. Excuse me 1 second. I'm on Zoom. Can I call you back? Sorry about that. This is a map of Europe that I drew, believe it or not, in 1945. That's why it's in French. And it's everything that you see in red on the map are all the countries that the Germans conquered in Europe during World War II. And we lived in a very small country called Belgium. Follow the arrow, there it is. It's just north of France. It's about the size of the state of Maryland. Very, very small. And at the time of World War II, there were approximately 65,000 Jewish people living in Belgium. We lived in the Jewish section of Antwerp, which at that particular time was one of the main ports of embarkation to the United States. My parents were Ruchel and Chaim Goldsmith. So this is their wedding picture. My parents were originally from Poland, and as young adult people, they liked to travel through Europe, which is what they did, and they actually met in Antwerp in 1929. They fell in love and decided to get married and stay there. So they got married in October 1930. My parents were Orthodox Jewish people, so we were somewhat religious. We observed all the Jewish holidays. We had a kosher home. And my parents were also middle-class people. My father was a plumber. He had his own business. And my mother was a homemaker. And in addition to that, my parents were also multilingual, meaning they spoke French and Flemish, which were the two official languages in Belgium, and they also spoke German, Polish, and Russian. And so 1 year later, on December 11th, 1931, I was born. That's me. So that makes me 91 years young. And I do remember a very happy and normal early childhood. As a matter of fact, here's another picture of my father, my mother, and myself when I was a couple of years old. And then, at the age of 6.5, my parents sent me to a kindergarten in an all-day Hebrew school. And this is a picture that I took of one of the entrances to the Hebrew school. So first of all, let me explain the pictures. Some of the pictures that you are seeing are old pictures that my mother was able to save. And some of the pictures like this one are pictures that I took when I went back to Belgium to retrace my steps 40 years after I came to our country. So I came to the United States in 1948, and I went back in 1988. And this is a picture that I took of the entrance to the Hebrew school in 1988. It has somewhat become remarkable to me because it is now 2023, right? And take a look, in 1988, they already had concrete blocks in the street, metal stanchions on the sidewalk, metal gates at the entrance, and security cameras. And unfortunately, I can tell you that now anti-Semitism in Europe is about the worst since World War II. And also, unfortunately, anti-Semitism is on the increase in our own country in the last few years. So I could not get, the school was closed, it was called the Tachkamoni School, and I could not get in there, so here are some pictures. This is my kindergarten picture. And I am standing in the middle row between the two girls, the second one from the right. And by the way, since it was a religious school, boys and girls were together only in kindergarten. After that, boys and girls were separated. So my next picture, which is my first grade picture, you can see it's all boys. And I am sitting in the front row, the second one from the right. And it is while I was in that class that my sister Lillian was born. She was born on December 26, 1939. And it was a very, very happy occasion because World War II had already started. So World War II started on September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, and my sister was born 3 months later. And by the way, the picture that you're looking at was the very last picture that was taken of my sister and I before things got very, very bad in Belgium. So now to my story. Belgium was invaded on May 10th, 1940, and our family, along with thousands of other people from Belgium, tried to flee the Germans on foot, who were going towards northern France. And unfortunately, we never made it. The Germans caught up with us very quickly and made everybody turn around and go back to wherever they came from. So we went back to Antwerp, where my parents tried to reestablish a normal life, but unfortunately, it only lasted a very, very, very short time, because very soon the anti-Jewish decrees and regulations and restrictions were issued. And here are some of them, or many of them. So I'm going to read you some of them in chronological order as they happened in Belgium. October 28, 1940. Jewish people had to register with the Germans and were eliminated from the public administration, the legal and the teaching professions. May 31, 1941. Jewish people had to display signs identifying Jewish-owned businesses. And non-Jewish people were actually urged not to patronize those stores. August 29, 1941, the curfew was set for Jewish people only between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., thereby restricting freedom of movement. Not only that, imagine this, just because we were Jewish, for no other reason, we could no longer enter public places. We couldn't go to a park, we could not go to a museum, we could not go to a library, any public place, we couldn't go there anymore. November 25, 1941, all Jewish children were expelled from public schools. March 11, 1942, the Nazis imposed a special forced labor on the Jews in Belgium, and the last edict came on May 27, 1942, where all Jews had to wear a yellow star. And I remember wearing my star on my jacket near my lapel. And so in August 1942, my father received a notice in the mail to go to a forced labor camp in northern France. And I remember my parents talking about it because I just happened to be in the kitchen when they were discussing it. It turns out that my father's view prevailed. He was young. He was only 39 at the time. He was in good health, that my father said to me, and I'm repeating them to you word for word. He said, "You are the little man in the house now, and so you'll have to help take care of your mother and your sister until I come back." And I told him I would. I took it very seriously. And as far as I am concerned, that was the day I grew up, and I lost my childhood, and I was only 10 years old. A little later, we received a postcard from my father. As you can see on the right side, it's addressed to 34 Korte-Kiewitzstraat, which is the street that we lived on in Antwerp. In the center, you can see the German cancellation stamp. And in the upper right corner, you can also see a French cancellation stamp, which says Pas de Calais. And Pas de Calais, indeed, was a city in northern France. And in the back of the postcard, my father wrote in Flemish, by the way, that he's near Boulogne. Boulogne was right next to Pas de Calais, and Groeten van Halle, which means greetings to everybody, and that's it. And that's all that we heard from him. Then in September 1942, the street that we lived on was raided by the Nazis. And so this is a picture that I took of my house when I went back 40 years later. Follow the arrow, okay? That's my house. That's 3 stories high, 2 windows wide. I just want to explain to you that the street, first of all, as you can see, all houses were attached. Number 34, Korte-Kiewitzstraat, was somewhat closer to the center of the street. And also, when I took that picture 40 years later, I really did not recognize my house because it had been renovated. And so I took the picture with the house next door to it, which is a mirror image, but that's what our house used to look like. And if you go up towards the roof, you will see an overhang, a cornice. And that cornice had been removed during the renovation in my house, but it's part of the story. So let me explain the raid to you. What the Nazis did was to come in the middle of the night, when everybody was sleeping, sealed off the street with trucks from both ends, and then started pulling out the Jewish people from their homes, starting at each end of the street. I just want to remind you that it was very, very easy for them, because remember, we had registered. They knew exactly where we lived. And so when they started pulling out the people from their homes, there was a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming, a lot of commotion going on. And that actually woke my mother up. And she looked outside her bedroom window, which was the front window on the second floor of the house. She looked outside and she saw what was happening. Not only that, she realized what was happening. So she quickly grabbed a blanket, my baby sister and myself. We went up to the top floor of the house, all the way to the rear of the house. There was a metal ladder that was attached to the wall leading up to a skylight onto the roof. That's how we got on the roof. My mother closed the skylight. By the way, it was a flat roof. And we walked all the way from the rear of the house to the front of the house, and we laid down in front of that cornice that used to be there, the overhang. And once we had laid down, my mother covered us up with a blanket. And I very distinctly remember laying there shivering, not knowing what was going to happen to us. A little later, we heard our door being broken down, a lot of commotion inside the house, which turned out that the Nazis trashed the inside of the house, but they didn't find us. However, one German soldier did go up that ladder, opened up the skylight, and he poked his head through. It was dark that night, so he had a flashlight, and he looked around with the flashlight. But because he was at the rear of the house, and we were under the blanket in the front of the house, about 35, 40 feet away, he did not see us. So he closed the skylight, went back down. Shortly after that, we heard more banging on our house. It turned out the Nazis boarded up the front of the house so nobody could get in and out. And we laid on the roof until my mother was absolutely sure that the raid was over. And once my mother was sure, we went back inside, and I have to tell you, my mother lost it. Because my mother was a very, very good and very proud housekeeper. And here we walked into a house that had been completely ransacked. I'm talking about, they tore down the drapes and the curtains, they broke the furniture, there was food smeared all over the walls of the kitchens, pots and pans all over. It was a mess. So she sat on the bed and cried for a little while, and then she finally collected herself and told me that she was going to see one of our non-Jewish friends to see if he could help us. By the way, I forgot to mention to you at the very beginning that even though we lived in the Jewish section of Antwerp, Korte-Kiewitzstraat was approximately 50% Jewish and 50% non-Jewish. So we had a lot of very, very good non-Jewish friends. And she was going to see this one particular man who was a policeman in Antwerp and also a member of the Belgium Underground. And so she thought he might be able to help us. So she couldn't go out the front of the house, so she went out to the back. We had like a little backyard. It butted up against the train tracks leading into the train station, and on the other side was a street. And so that's how she went around the block, saw our friend, and came back a little later and told me that she had made arrangements to hide my sister and I in a Catholic convent. So, want to mention something special about my mother. My mother, like many, many, many Holocaust survivors, could not talk about the Holocaust. It was very, very emotional for her. She kept breaking down a lot. And I, as a little boy, kept pestering her with questions. So to make a long story short, it took me many, many years, to find out the little piece here and the little piece there, to be able to put a story together. And eventually I found out from my mother that she had decided, after she dropped us off at the convent, to go back to Antwerp and join the Belgian underground. And so, how we got to the convent, by the way, was that the next night, at the appointed time, my mother smuggled us out through the back of the house. There was a car waiting for us in the street. The car took us out of town, and my mother dropped us off at the convent. And incidentally, only Mother Superior knew who we were, no one else. So, we stayed at the convent, until about the end of December 1942, when suddenly my mother shows up. It turns out that my mother had found out from the Belgium underground that the Nazis were going to raid the convent, and so she quickly came down to pick us up. And not only took us out of there, but also told Mother Superior that if she was hiding any other Jewish people there, to move them out. Because at that particular time, the edict was that if you were caught hiding Jews, you would be shot immediately. And I truly believe with this one little action, my mother saved a few lives. So my mother took us out and dropped us off at another member of the Belgium Underground, where my mother went out and then tried to find other places to hide us, and she finally decided to split us up. So my sister went to live with a private Catholic family. There's my sister, the second one from the right. You can see she blended in quite well. They were wonderful people and took loving care of her. I, on the other hand, my mother sent me to a Catholic boys' orphanage in a village called Weelde, which was right on the border between Belgium and Holland, in the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium. And this is a picture that I took of the building 40 years later. Except it's not, when I went back there, it was not an orphanage anymore. It was actually a place for homeless people. But this wonderful, wonderful Catholic priest, his name was Father Ivor Cornelissen. He's on the left side of the picture. Took wonderful care of me. First thing he did for me when I got there is he changed my name. And my name became Willie Peters, which is a very typical Belgium name. And the second thing that he gave me were false baptismal papers. So if anybody would question me, I would have a document to show that I was Catholic. And indeed, for all practical purposes, I was outwardly Catholic. Because I went to church every single day, and I even went to Catholic parochial school every single day. It was a wonderful place to be in, but Father Cornelius was a smart man. He felt that it was too dangerous for me to stay too long in one place. So after a few months, he decided to transfer me to another orphanage where I continued going to church every day. As a matter of fact, over there, I even became an altar boy. Basically, was to blend in with the rest of the boys. And, of course, I went to parochial school. However, in May 1944, the place that I was in got raided by the Nazis, and I was caught. And the way I was caught was very, very simple. By the way, I never found out how the raid happened. Never did. But I was caught. And like I said, it was very, very simple. Since it was a boys' orphanage, they made us undress naked, and only the Jewish boys were circumcised. Now, I know a thing like that cannot happen today anymore because many, many non-Jewish boys get circumcised at birth nowadays, for medical reasons. But in those days in Europe, only Jewish boys got circumcised. So that's how I got caught. And that's when I found out there were 5 other Jewish boys there. We all kept it very secret from each other. So they took us to prison, where they questioned us. They wanted to know whether there were more Jewish kids, which we didn't know. And finally, I was taken to another prison where suddenly in the middle of the night, they rounded up a whole bunch of Jewish children and put us on the freight train. Now, I want to make sure that you understand what a freight train looks like. It's not a passenger train. It doesn't have any windows, it doesn't have any seats. It's a wooden boxcar that carries freight or animals. That's it. They put us on there, and as soon as we got on there, the oldest boy, whose name was Joseph, by the way, he was only 16 years old, but he was big, he kind of became our leader, and he actually urged us to escape from the train. We were much younger. We didn't know what to do. But he apparently had a plan in his head. So let me describe Joseph to you. Joseph, like I told you, was 16 years old. He was very tall for his age. So he was the only one that wore long pants. The rest of us were much younger, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. We wore short pants. Underneath his pants, he had a pair of boots. And in one of the boots, he had a piece of steel about a foot long. That piece of steel, basically he had in his possession to use as a weapon to protect himself, if need be. But instead what he did is the following. While the train was moving, he took that piece of steel, started at the floor of the train, and went up 3 wooden side slats and broke them apart and made an opening with that piece of steel large enough for himself, because he was the biggest one there. He did this incidentally while the train was moving. And when he was finished, he told us the following. He said, if the train stops, or if the train slows down enough, he says, I will push you out one by one, and the only advice I can give you is, when you jump out of the train, roll away from the tracks to minimize getting hurt. And so the train never stopped, but did slow down considerably at a sharp end. And he said, "That's it." And he pushed us out one by one, and all of us escaped from the train. Once the train was gone, we had to do a couple of things. First of all, it was still dark, it was still at night, so we had to find everybody, which we did. And secondly, we had to check everybody to see if there were any broken bones or anything like that. And we were very fortunate. We only had bleeding cuts and sprains. That was it. So once we had done those two things, dawn was breaking. We looked out in the distance and we saw woods, and as a group we went into the woods and we hid there. And once we got there, we started talking to each other. And then we realized, we didn't know where we were. So Joseph said, "I'll try to find out," but he could go out only at night, so he would not be seen. Came back the following night, and he said that he thought that we were still in Belgium because he had seen a sign of a village called Perway, which sounds French-like. Basically, to us it meant we are in the French-speaking part of Belgium. And that was very good news. But then after a while, things got worse. We had no water, we had no food, the sprains were getting worse, the cuts were starting to get infected, and again we're looking to Joseph for leadership. He doesn't know what to do. But eventually he makes a decision all by himself to go back into the village of Perway, go to the rectory next to the Catholic Church and speak to the priest there and tell him about us. Now that was very dangerous because, the priest could have said, "I'm sorry, I cannot help you." Or the priest could have said, "Just a moment, and gotten on the telephone and turned us in." But he didn't. He was very receptive to the idea of helping us. It took a little while, but he placed each one of us with a private Catholic family in the village, and each family thought they had the only Jewish child. And the next picture is the house that I was hidden in, at 13 Rue de l'Église in Perway. And they hid me upstairs in the attic. And next picture is the people that hid me. Monsieur Bautier, Madame Bautier. Very devout Catholic people and wonderful human beings. And their daughter Fernand, and next picture is their other daughter Madeleine. And like I told you, they hid me in the attic. And this is a picture of the attic that I took 40 years later. I couldn't believe it. It looked just like I remembered it, except the window had been changed. But otherwise, it was still totally unfinished. And that's where I stayed in hiding, and I had to be absolutely quiet. And the only time that the Bautier family let me out was at night. And they let me out in their backyard so I could get some fresh air. And this is a picture of the backyard now. Then they used to grow their own vegetables, but now it's grass. And as you can see, it's also surrounded by a brick wall. And they let me out. Not only that, they also were nice enough to buy me a pet rabbit, so I would have someone to play with. And by the way, I kept the rabbit in the tool shed off the picture. So now back to my mother. Again, This is information that I found out many, many years later. I did not know that my mother had kept track of me while I was in hiding. And she had found out that I had been caught, and now she wanted to know where I was there anything that she could do to help me. So she was going to see another Catholic priest. His name was Father Joseph André, who lived in the city of Namur. She was going to see him as threefold. Number one, he was a member of the Belgium Underground. Number two, was a Catholic priest. And number three, he had very, very good connections with the Germans. So she thought he might be able to find out. So she made an appointment to see him, and unfortunately for my mother, her timing was awful. The day she arrived in Namur for the appointment was also the day the Allies bombed the city. And my mother was caught in the air raid, and my mother completely lost her left leg. It was completely severed from her. And she lay there bleeding. As a matter of fact, she almost bled to death, but fortunately, people found her in the rubble and took her to a hospital in Namur. Back to me. I had now been with the Bautier family for several months, when in the fall of 1944, we were liberated by the American troops. And this is the only picture that I have of liberation. Unfortunately, it's very fuzzy, but if you can take a good look, in the middle, you'll see an American soldier in uniform with a helmet on, and he's actually sitting on top of a jeep. And he's surrounded by people from Paraguay. So as soon as we got liberated by the Americans, the Bautier family was really nice enough to start looking for my mother. And it took a little while, but they were the ones, with the help of the Belgian Red Cross, they were the ones that found my mother in the hospital in Namur and reunited me with my mother. I have to tell you, it was a fabulous, fabulous moment. Because even though my mother was very, very sick and she was in the hospital, she was alive. I was alive. My sister was alive. Now all we had to do was to wait for my father to come back so we could be a family again and start living a normal life like everybody else. But like I told you, my mother was very sick. She lost a tremendous amount of blood. She still could not take care of me. So the Bautier family took me back, but it was only for a short while, because very soon after that, an American organization called the Joint Distribution Committee came into Europe and started pulling out the Jewish people and putting them in either DP camps, that's displaced person camps, or homes. So before I show you the home, I want to show you this picture, which I'm very, very proud to have. This is Father Joseph André. This picture was taken in 1945, I believe, or 46, I'm not sure. I'd like you to know that Father André has been declared a righteous Gentile. He saved many, many Jewish lives. As a matter of fact, if you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., in the Righteous Gentile section, there's a big picture of him over there. And not only did he save a lot of lives, but also after the war, he was also a generous man. He had a large house, and there were a lot of refugees that were moving from place to place. He hosted many of them until they could find another place to go to. And one of the people that he hosted was my mother. And there is, she's the lady on the right side of the picture. Take a good look at the picture. She's wearing slacks. If you take a look on the right leg of the slack, there's a white shoe there, but on the left leg, there's no shoe. That's because at that particular time, she was still wearing a peg leg. She had not healed completely yet. It took a few months later until she finally got an artificial leg. So next picture is the first home that I went into. It was called the Home de la Ba. Very large building. Half the building were, the left half were Jewish children. The right half were all American troops. They were the drivers, the truck drivers, supplying the American soldiers. They were part of what was then called the Red Ball Express. But I want you to pay specific attention to the round tower on the right side of the picture with the gray stripes. There's the tower with the gray stripes, and that's me. That's what I looked like after liberation. I was 12 years old. And shortly after that, in May 1945, the war ended in Europe, and the American soldiers left. And soon after that, more Jewish children started coming in, except they were not from Belgium, but they were from all the other countries that were in red that you saw on the map, and all of them were coming from concentration camps. All these children were orphans, and that is how we started to learn about the horrors of the Holocaust. It was by word of mouth. People telling other people. Just want you to know, this is 1945, 1946. No TV, no instant news. That's how we learned, by word of mouth. It took a long time to come out. And when the building filled up, we had approximately 300 children there, and we needed help because many of us had problems. Some were physically sick, some were mentally sick, some were emotionally sick, and they decided, to take 50 of us, including myself. I'm bringing us to a much smaller home, where a doctor and Mrs. Jaffe lovingly took care of us. It's called the Home de Provençal. As you can see, it's much smaller. It was a wonderful, wonderful time, except for me, it was a terrible time, because while I was in that home, 3 different people had come back and told my mother, who then told me, that my father was no longer coming back, that my father had died in a concentration camp called Auschwitz. And that was a very big blow to me personally, because I was very attached to my dad. Now, next picture. That's a picture of my Uncle Murray. My Uncle Murray was my father's younger brother. By the way, my father was one of 8 children, 7 of which lived here in the United States before World War II. He was the only one left there. But this is my Uncle Murray, he lived in Brooklyn, in New York, and when the war broke out, he joined the army, and then he fought in the European theater, and after the war was over, he started looking for my mother, and found my mother. And they made arrangements that when he got back to the States, he would get our family to sponsor us, which they did. So the next picture is actually the shipping papers showing that we left Antwerp, Belgium on April 7th, 1948. Took us 10 days to arrive in New York Harbor on April 17th, 1948. And then very shortly after that was a Jewish holiday, and a picture was taken of us, and this is what we looked like. My sister Lillian, my mother, and myself. And that's how we got here. And so before I finish, I just want to give you my conclusion. And I want to say, that we were very, very lucky, that we survived. But most of us didn't tell our stories. As a matter of fact, I didn't talk much about it. I couldn't, because I was working. I did tell my family, but that's it. But once I retired, I started telling my story in public. And the only reason, incidentally, that I'm talking in public happens to be because of a movie maker by the name of Steven Spielberg. He created the Show Up Foundation, and they interviewed me, and it's the young lady that came to my house that urged me to speak. And I am going to speak. I made myself a promise as long as I can, because the Holocaust story must be told. It must not be forgotten, and it must not ever, ever happen again. And so it's important, that we act against evil and prejudice, anti-Semitism, intolerance, and hatred. I'm asking all of you, please, please, do not hate. Hate is very negative. It doesn't get you anywhere. And by the way, just in case you didn't know this, no one is born hating. You have to be taught how to hate. You have to learn how to hate. And so I'm asking you not to hate. And I'm also asking you so you should become decent people to everybody. I'm talking about become righteous human beings who refuse to be indifferent when you see something wrong. When you see something wrong, say something or do something, but don't walk away quietly. And by the way, I also want to add to this over here that all the people that helped me in various different ways were humane people. They had compassion. They had sympathy. They were considerate of other people. They actually, as far as I am concerned, put their own lives in jeopardy. They were absolutely wonderful, wonderful people. And also, last but not least, it's important to be counted as revisionists. Those are the people that say that the Holocaust never happened. But I'm telling you, it did happen. I was there. I survived it. And I am a living witness to it. So this is the end of my story. Now we're going to go to a break. And after the break, we're going to come back and then you can ask any question that you wish.
Danny, we are humbled to hear you and see you and join with this story. We'll be anxious to hear how our talk back goes. I do appreciate your spirit here. Those of you that are in attendance right now, if you look at the back of your bulletin, you'll see that there's a little QR code that we're including in the bulletin now. So if you want to use this as an introduction to your friends of who we are and what we're about, that's an opportunity to do that. And this is the time that we're able to bring our thoughts to a close. If you would please.
In your program, you can help me accept the chalice.
If you would please stand.
While we extend distinguished this flame, we still carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and fire of commitment until we are together